Please rewind this cassette.
So I finally got around to seeing Bohemian Rhapsody, and it was kind of okay-ish. I know critics are mixed on this one, but mainstream audiences seem to be loving it, so who gives a shit, right? And I really hate to be someone that falls on the middle on something, because it's just kind of fucking pathetic and you don't really have anything interesting to say, but that's unfortunately the case here. Now, this film had a bunch of behind-the-scenes issues, and to go into it would be a video in itself, so I'm just gonna ignore most of that. This was directed by Bryan Singer. Well, at least most of the movie was directed by Bryan Singer before he was fired, and I gotta give this movie a compliment. For the most part, it's well made. The cinematography is rather lovely, and many of the concert scenes really pop. The biggest issue with the movie is the one that everyone seems to have, and that's the PG-13 rating. Also, there's this jukebox-like construction with the film that just doesn't feel genuine or right with this story to tell about Freddie Mercury. I was liking it for the first 20 minutes or so, even if the teeth seemed over the top. Like, holy shit, Freddie Mercury's teeth were not that bad. I mean, I like seeing the band get together. That's always fun in a movie, isn't it? But all of this stuff is cut short for a very long middle section that focuses on this somber tone. I'm not sure if all of this sad or melancholy was a good idea. And with some of the facts changed, it just doesn't set right with me. I don't think this is who Freddie Mercury was, and I don't think of Queen this way. See, Queen's music is fun, it's entertaining, it's in your face, it's bombastic, it can be heavy, it can be operatic, and at times it can be show-tuney. But one thing you could say about Freddie Mercury is that he wasn't whiny, he wasn't that feminine acting, he was a man, he acted like a man, he had a sense of humor, he was interesting, he wasn't this guy. So much of this movie is Rami Malek just looking sad at the camera and shit like that, and it's like, really? That's the direction you went? He's just so sad all the time because you don't want to show him fuck dudes? Honestly, I'm confused as to what the surviving bandmates wanted this movie to be. I don't know if this was supposed to be a tribute to their friend, or if it was just supposed to be a way to make money. This feels like a cynical product and not a genuine story being told over the course of 2 hours. I don't dislike the idea of the structure of the movie. We start and end at Live Aid. I could have been fine with that. That's actually kind of clever, but it's everything in between that's really the issue. See, you could definitely argue that the highlight of the movie is the Live Aid sequence at the end, but there's not this emotional payoff that they think it's supposed to have because the movie didn't earn it. So you're sitting there as they cut to all these different reaction shots of people, and you're supposed to be like, wow, Freddie's so brave, he's so great in this moment, this is triumphant, but I didn't feel it, even though technically the scene works. It just never really gets into a groove or finds a sharp focus, and that's what a biopic like this needs. I mean, most of the scenes with Freddie work well enough, and I like Mr. Robot in the role, and I think that he does a pretty good job, and I like the scenes where he's hanging out with the bandmates or with his girlfriend or the love of his life, Mary. But most of the ensemble stuff is just filled with cliches and bad jokes. Mike Myers has a pretty fun cameo, I guess, but it's a little too self-aware for my taste. It's a colorful film, and at even times a funny one, an entertaining one. And shockingly, some of the scenes are actually really emotional and actually cut deep, and you feel like you're watching a movie and you forget that this is a guy trying to pretend he's Freddie Mercury, but most of the time I never bought it. Perhaps a rock opera approach would have smoothed some of these things out. Or an edgier and chaotic film, something with a lot more energy and quick cutting and just more to it, something like a Martin Scorsese film. I'm not exactly sure what went wrong here. It's actually more fascinating to think about how this film turned out than actually watching the film itself. But for being such a hardcore Queen fan, the thing that disappointed me the most was the lack of detail, and I think details are very important when it comes to making movies like this. You don't really feel like you learn anything new about Freddie Mercury. You don't feel like you get any insight on the band or their process or any of the iconic moments in their career. It's just, hey, it's Bohemian Rhapsody, it's Killer Queen, it's Another One Bites the Dust, but you don't actually feel like this is how the songs were written. There's a lack of cameos from other famous musicians at the time. Why couldn't we get an actor playing David Bowie working with him on Under Pressure? Instead, Under Pressure just comes in at the most random fucking time. I mean, ultimately, it's a melodrama, and I just really didn't want this to be a melodrama, but even as a melodrama, if you take it on its own terms, it doesn't fucking work. I mean, this is going to sound like a really big insult, and I don't mean it to come off as condescending to anyone who likes this movie, but this felt like a television film with a budget. I mean, the stuff with Mary was fine, and all of the recording scenes are fun, but for the most part, I've seen all of this before, and I've seen it been done better in other movies, and honestly, at this point, it's just boring. I mean, it's a huge hit at the box office. It's now the most successful music biopic of all time, so it's not a total failure, but it's easy to call this a disappointment. It had its heart in the right place, but unfortunately in between its legs it had no balls. Also, where were the fucking deep cuts? This was just like every song you've ever heard on the radio. If you kinda know Queen, this was nothing for any hardcore fans. Like, they didn't even mention Flash Gordon, and that's pretty famous. I mean, shit, they just ignored like huge chunks of their discography. This could have been an epic. Instead, it's just kind of a faint something that comes into existence and then you forget about it after you leave the theater. At least that's how I felt about it. I just can't believe that the interesting guys in Queen, and especially Brian May, could actually be behind something so generic, and I actually guess Sacha Baron Cohen would have made a better movie, because this needed to be rated R. I'm sorry, it just did. Perhaps it was all of the fear of trying to live up to a legacy. This film actually, if anything, is a nice exploration of legacy and how people see each other after someone passes. Was the band too afraid to show any problems with themselves and with Freddie that they didn't want to be honest with any of the scenes or any of the emotional beats, so they felt that they had to make this predictable narrative in order to make people think, oh, Freddie was such a good guy and we're such good guys. There's a scene that's so terrible where they all go to a party at Freddie's house and they all leave early because they don't want to drink with him because they have to go spend time with their wives. Really? Are you fucking kidding me? Do they not understand that there's nothing cinematic about that and that I just don't buy that at all? Like, okay, sure, you want to be with your wife, but why can't you fucking drink? I mean, poor Brian May, he couldn't be an astrophysicist. He just had to settle for being one of the greatest guitarists of all time. I'm really scared, though, that this will spawn a series of movies that are this cynical just because of the success of this one. They're already making an Elton John movie called Rocket Man. I guess this is worth a watch, maybe watch it at home, but I liked Love and Mercy a lot more, and I thought that sad tone kind of fit that a lot more. I don't think this was the right energy for a Queen biopic. What are you gonna do? Another one bites the dust. 6 out of 10.
Please rewind this cassette.